Sergeant Joseph M. Darby is a former U.S. Army reservist known as the Whistleblower in the Abu Ghraib torture and prisoner abuse scandal. During the war in Iraq that began in March 2003, which involved personnel of the United States Army and the Central Intelligence Agency who committed a series of human rights violations against the detainees in the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. These violations included physical and sexual abuse, torture, rape, sodomy, and murder. Darby joined the Army Reserve to serve as a military police officer. When his unit, the 372nd Military Police Company, was sent overseas as a result of the attacks on 9/11, Darby found himself in an office position in the Abu Ghraib prison.
Others guarded the prisoners. And then one day, when Joe Darby wanted scenic pictures to send home, he spotted the unit's camera buff prison guard, Charles Grainer.
So I walked up to Grainer and hey, do you have any pictures? And he said, yeah, hold on. Reaches into his computer bag and pulls out 2 CDs and just hands them to me.
And he gives you these discs. Do you think he realized what was on them? I mean, do you think he knew he was
I don't think he realized what was on, but I don't think it would have mattered either way. I knew Grainer, and Grainer trusted me.
That trust was about to change Darby's life forever. He copied Grainer's discs and gave him back the originals. When Darby looked at the photos, he first saw shots of life in Iraq, but then came upon the pictures that launched the scandal, starting with this pyramid of naked Iraqis.
I didn't realize it was Iraqis at first, because we lived in prison cells too.
And you thought this was maybe Americans? You thought that
I had no idea.
Soldiers
I had
goofing
no
off.
idea. I laughed. I looked at it, and I laughed, and then the next photo was of Grainer and England standing behind them. And I was like, wait a minute, this is the prison. These are prisoners. Then it kind of sunk in that they were doing this to prisoners. This was people being forced to do this.
Forced, Darby says, by Grainer, who he calls the ringleader.
What was Charles Grainer like?
If you were around him long enough, you saw that he had just a dark side, a morbid side.
And a sadistic side, according to Darby, who told us Grainer directed the abusive posing and picture-taking during his night shift, when he and his buddies were alone with the prisoners.
In his interview with 60 Minutes, Darby explains how he felt that he had to alert somebody about the pictures that he had seen. He did this because it violated everything that he personally believed in, as well as what he'd been taught about the rules of war. This was no doubt a very brave act, because Darby knew that he would be scrutinized by his fellow soldiers, as well as face the possibility of death or harm by his fellow company officers. I think that Joseph Darby chose to protect his personal beliefs over his countrymen and fellow soldiers. Although the acts that were being done to these prisoners might have violated the Geneva Convention, I firmly believe that Darby chose to protect the enemy over his countrymen. Having said that, I still believe he did what was right, and what these men were doing had to be stopped. Overall, Darby was successful in his goal of blowing the whistle on the Abu Ghraib prisoner abuse scandal. However, the way in which the events unfolded after he brought the situation to light did not go the way he would have liked. Originally, Darby wanted to stay anonymous in his whistleblowing process, but this did not happen. When the media finally got their hands on the photos, Darby's identity was revealed. His identity was further put on blast when Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense, publicly congratulated his courageous acts during a Senate hearing.
Darby had betrayed his fellow soldiers. The commander of the local VFW post, Colin Engelbach, told us what people were calling Darby.
He was a rat, he was a traitor, he let his unit down, he let his fellow soldiers down, U.S. military. Basically, he was no good.
And you agree with that?
I agree that his actions that he did were no good, and borderline traitor, yes.
What he says in his defense is, look, I'm an MP, and this is something which was illegal.
Right. But do you put the enemy above your buddies? I wouldn't.